Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to Audiobook Dynasty. If you want early access and even more parts for free, make sure to join me on Patreon. At noon, on the seaside of Kokoyasi village. Barrels of fresh water, baskets of vegetables and fruit, and a large amount of meat were delivered to the Wind Rider. The villagers were extremely enthusiastic, even wanting to give their homes to Cealan. Enough, enough. There's no room for more. Seeing that the storage room was already full, Cealan stopped the overly eager villagers. The captured fishmen with bounties were already lying unconscious in the cabin. There were also piles of treasure and berries stored inside the Wind Rider's hold. Everything was ready. It was time to set sail. Goodbye, Mr. Cealan. Nami, don't cause trouble for Mr. Cealan. The villagers waved goodbye to both Cealan and Nami. Nami, stay by Mr. Cealan's side from now on. Don't be so willful. Nojiko smiled as she gave Nami a reminder. The two of them were as close as sisters. Of course, Nojiko was reluctant to see Nami leave, but at the same time, she was genuinely happy for her. I'm not a burden. I'll be helpful. Nami clenched her fist and assured Nojiko confidently. It's just a shame that I won't be able to see Belmir's orange trees. Nami's mood dropped. Those orange trees were the legacy left behind by her adoptive mother, Belmir. As long as she was with the orange trees, it felt like Belmir was still by her side. That's not necessarily true. Nojiko winked at Nami with a playful smile before turning away. With such a good captain, Nami really had nothing to worry about. Hi. Nami was momentarily confused. Come on, Nami, it's time to go. Cealan's voice came from behind. He was already standing on the deck of the ship. Nami didn't have time to think about it any further. She quickly ran aboard the Wind Rider. As soon as she stepped onto the ship, Nami noticed two vibrant orange trees swaying on the deck. Thank you, Cealan. You're amazing. Nami threw her arms around Cealan, her excitement overflowing. It turned out that her captain was such a considerate person. What should she do if she starts liking him even more? Alright, let's hurry up and set sail. Nami's soft body pressed against Cealan as her short orange hair brushed against his face. Cealan helplessly pushed her away. Seducing him like this was asking for trouble. Yes, Captain. Nami gave him a crisp salute. Just as she was about to start the ship, she paused. Cealan, where are we heading? Destination, Logue Town, full speed ahead. Cealan pointed toward their next course. Nami immediately turned the helm. With Nami's superb navigation skills, the Wind Rider began its journey toward Logue Town. While Nami focused on steering, Cealan entered the treasure room, where the loot from the Arlong pirates was stored. Although the Arlong pirates had squandered most of their money on building Arlong Park and their foolish dream of the Arlong Empire, there were still 80 million berries remaining. The total bounties of the Arlong pirates added up to nearly 45 million berries. There were also the 100 million berries that Nami had handed over. Even without receiving any bounty rewards yet, Cealan now had 180 million berries on hand. System, consume 180 million berries to increase synchronization progress. As the berries in the treasure room disappeared, Cealan's system panel began to change once again. Consume all berries to improve synchronization progress. The system panel flickered for a moment before updating. Host, Cealan Alaric. Template, Berserker Class Heracles. Synchronization progress, 50.5%. Berries, 3 million. Strength, B+. Durability, B+. Agility, B+. Magic, B+. Luck, A. Noble Phantasm, A+. Personal skills, Battle Continuation, B. Mind's Eye, Fake, B. Valor, A+. Divinity, A. Madness Enhancement, B. Noble Phantasms, God Hand, The 12 Labors, B. 9 Lives, Shooting the 100 Heads, C. A+. A tremendous force surged into his body, instantly enhancing all of Cealan's attributes. He nodded with satisfaction. Every one of his physical stats had risen from B to B+. Don't underestimate the small addition of a plus sign. B+ represented an exceptional level, effectively doubling the attribute's power. At this point, Cealan's strength, speed, endurance, and magic power had all doubled, making his combat abilities even more overwhelming. With my current strength, no one in the first half of the Grand Line can compare to me. The increase in power was within Cealan's expectations. However, the change in synchronization progress made him frown slightly. The progress hadn't reached the expected 55%, stopping instead at 50.5%. After reaching 50%, does it really take 100 million berries to increase synchronization by just 1%? Cealan thought it over and found this result acceptable. Once they entered the Grand Line, pirates would be everywhere. In the weak seas of the East Blue, there were only a handful of pirates with bounties in the tens of millions. The rest were small fry with bounties of 1 million or less. Cealan had spent a lot of time and effort capturing those pirates, but the bounty earnings weren't much. The Grand Line was different. It was a paradise for pirates. Any pirate group with even the slightest ambition was there. Pirates with bounties of 10 or 20 million were as common as crucian carp crossing the river. They were countless. Just by defeating any pirate crew, he could easily obtain 50 million berries. Figures like Arlong and Don Krieg were considered lower tier in the Grand Line, nowhere near the top. There were also the 7 warlords of the sea. Despite their relatively low bounties, their strength was undeniable, and they often commanded large crews. Although it wasn't possible to claim bounty rewards for capturing them, fighting such opponents could still improve his synchronization progress. Compared to hunting ordinary pirates, the cost-effectiveness of targeting the 7 warlords was much higher. The only issue is that I still don't have haki. Cealan couldn't help but feel frustrated. In the East Blue, there was no opportunity to learn haki. The reason he was able to push his swordsmanship to the level of a swordsman was entirely thanks to the Heracles template. Even in the first half of the Grand Line, haki was something only true elites possessed. It wasn't until the New World that haki became widespread. Without haki, facing Logia-type devil fruit users would put him at a serious disadvantage. No matter how powerful his physical attacks were, they would be completely ineffective. Likewise, Logia users couldn't hurt him either, but it would be a deadlock. Still, Cealan had a plan. Crocodile, who ruled over Alabasta, would make a good teacher. Of course, compared to someone like Kaido, Crocodile was far from the top. Kaido was a top-tier monster, capable of knocking out Conqueror's haki users with a single swing, or awakening the Nika fruit wielder with 2 strikes. At Cealan's current level, there was no way he could handle Kaido's brutal training methods. He hadn't even set foot on the path of haki yet, let alone reached the level where he could learn Kaido's advanced techniques. Crocodile, however, was just right. With his moderate-level armament and observation haki, he could still serve as an effective mentor. Cealan could already imagine the scene of himself awakening both types of haki under Crocodile's guidance. The Grand Line. I'm looking forward to it more and more. Cealan's blood was boiling with excitement. The East Blue was just the starting point of the pirate world. The Grand Line was where the real adventure began. It was far too dull to keep hunting small-time pirates with measly million-berry bounties. He wanted to charge into the Grand Line and fight against the true powerhouses. A few days later, the strongest bounty hunter in the East Blue struck again. Eliminated the Arlong pirates and liberated the Konami Islands. Another explosive headline appeared in the East Blue newspapers. It's only been a few days, and he already wiped out the Arlong pirates. The remaining pirates in the East Blue could hardly believe it. Don Krieg had just been killed a few days ago, and now the Arlong pirates were destroyed as well. This was the Arlong pirates, a powerful crew that had returned from the Grand Line. Compared to the local tyrant Don Krieg, the Arlong pirates were much stronger. Yet in less than a week, the 2 strongest pirate groups in the East Blue had been eliminated by Cealan. They really wanted to ask Cealan, don't you need to rest? Are we pirates really so worthy of your attention? The few remaining pirates in the East Blue were now living in fear, not daring to loot openly. For a time, the entire East Blue fell into silence. Days passed without a single report of pirate attacks. What? The Arlong pirates were destroyed. The villages that had been plundered by the Arlong pirates were shocked. The Arlong pirates' headquarters was located in Kokoyasi village, but their activities were not limited to that area. From time to time, they would sail out and raid the surrounding villages. Hundreds of villages had suffered under their brutality, and tens of thousands of villagers despised them to the core. It could be said that the Arlong pirates were infamous throughout the entire East Blue. Is it true? Did Lord Cealan really take them down? Countless villagers were stunned once again. They had always known that Cealan was strong, but they never expected him to be this powerful. In just a few days, the 2 major tyrants of the East Blue had been eliminated one after the other. The efficiency was unbelievable. Lord Cealan is here, and the skies have cleared. Lord Cealan is here, and the pirates are gone. Lord Cealan is here, and we have hope. Countless villagers wept with joy, shouting Cealan's name. Half a year ago, before Cealan arrived, they had been tormented endlessly by pirates. But in the 6 months since Cealan appeared, the number of pirates had steadily decreased, and their lives had improved day by day. Now that both the Krieg pirates and the Arlong pirates had been wiped out, there were hardly any pirates left in the East Blue. The entire East Blue had truly become the weakest sea, where pirates with bounties over 3 million were now extremely rare. At the East Blue Navy's office, Cealan also received the news, but instead of feeling happy, his expression remained troubled. There was still another major issue weighing on his mind. Captain Nezumi from the 16th branch has been missing for several days now, and there's still no sign of him. Cealan asked his 2 subordinates, frowning with concern. Nezumi was the highest-ranking officer of the 16th branch. His disappearance was a significant matter for the East Blue Navy. There are some clues, but... The subordinate looked at Cealan nervously, hesitating. It's already come to this and you're still hesitating? Speak. Cealan slammed the table, his anger flaring. We received information that Captain Nezumi went to Kokoyasi village and never returned. You mean, he was killed by the Arlong pirates? Cealan's tone eased slightly. With the Arlong pirates destroyed, there was no need to make too much of it. It's unlikely. Captain Nezumi had long-standing financial ties with the Arlong pirates. The subordinate wiped the sweat from his forehead and cautiously handed over a stack of documents. What? This can't be true. How could a marine captain be connected with pirates? Cealan instinctively refused to believe it, but once he looked through the documents, he was stunned. The contents were shocking. Nezumi was not only closely associated with the Arlong pirates, but he also had dealings with many other pirate crews within the jurisdiction. Bang! 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 Boom! Cealan was furious, like an enraged lion. He slammed the table 3 times, each strike heavier than the last. On the 3rd strike, the table couldn't withstand the force and shattered into pieces. The day Nezumi went to meet the Arlong pirates, Cealan was there too. The 2 subordinates gritted their teeth as they reported. They knew just how much Cealan valued Cealan. Cealan, who had been furious just moments ago, suddenly froze. His anger seemed to dissipate, leaving him silent. He wanted to deny it instinctively. Cealan was a bounty hunter. How could he kill a marine captain? Was he not afraid of making the navy his enemy? But thinking about it carefully, Cealan was indeed the prime suspect. Since debuting in the East Blue, Cealan had eliminated hundreds of pirate crews. Among them were thousands of individuals with bounties, not to mention the countless small fry without bounties. Would someone like him really be afraid of the navy? The Arlong pirates were connected to Jinbi, the Knight of the Sea and one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Even the navy had to show them some respect and had never dared to wipe out the Arlong pirates. But Cealan had shown no hesitation, killing them without a second thought and completely annihilating the crew. With that in mind, killing a corrupt navy officer like Nezumi would be nothing for Cealan. Should we issue a bounty? The 2 subordinates asked nervously. A marine captain, even if corrupt, was still a member of the navy. Being killed by an outsider crossed a line the navy could not allow. But honestly, they didn't want to become enemies with Cealan either. He was the hero of the entire East Blue. If they put a bounty on him, the whole sea would erupt in chaos. Not to mention, Cealan's strength was terrifying. Even if the entire East Blue Navy joined forces, they might not be able to stop him. What kind of bounty are we talking about? Do you think this is something a human could handle? The usually refined Cealan couldn't help but curse. He was certain that if the navy really put a bounty on Cealan, the man wouldn't hesitate to hunt down marines as easily as he hunted pirates. Cealan clearly understood Cealan's terrifying potential. If they forced him into becoming the navy's enemy, he might awaken Conqueror's Haki and establish a 5-emperor balance in the New World. Just thinking about that possibility made Cealan shudder. If the man who had been slaughtering pirates like chickens turned to slaughtering marines instead, it would be the navy's worst nightmare. All of this would happen simply because they executed the wrong judgment over the death of a corrupt officer. The wave of public opinion would crush the navy's reputation beyond repair. Cealan did not kill Captain Nezumi. Captain Nezumi was killed by the Arlong pirates. Cealan remains the hero of the East Blue. Without the slightest hesitation, Cealan chose to clear Cealan of any suspicion. He would not allow this incident to drive Cealan into making an enemy of the navy. The 2 subordinates were completely stunned. They couldn't understand how things had turned out like this. What are you 2 standing around for? Spread the word immediately. Cealan needed to control the narrative as soon as possible. No one could be allowed to use this as leverage against Cealan. Yes, sir. We'll take care of it right away. The 2 subordinates responded quickly. Do you know where Cealan is headed? Just as they were about to leave, Cealan stopped them again. He's on his way to Lobe Town, probably to claim the bounty. The subordinates had already received this information. Good. I will personally meet with him and clear up any doubts he may have. Cealan waved them off, then sat back down, deep in thought, carefully planning how to approach Cealan. At noon, on the Wind Rider, Cealan and Nami were on the deck, enjoying lunch under the warm breeze and sunlight. Suddenly, a news coup flew across the sky. Nami took out a berry and bought a newspaper from the seagull. She glanced at the front page and couldn't help but scream. Hey! The newspaper says that Captain Nezumi was killed by Arlong. But I didn't see that happen at the time. Nami was very puzzled. She clearly remembered the marine captain who had worked with Arlong to cheat her out of her money. She hadn't seen his body at Arlong Park and had assumed he had escaped. Nami was certain that Arlong definitely didn't kill Nezumi. Of course you didn't see it. I'm the one who killed Nezumi. Cealan had no reason to hide the truth from Nami. After Cealan's reminder, Nami recalled the details of that day. Only Arlong had fallen from the sky, but Cealan had swung his swords twice. There had been a large amount of blood mist in the air. At the time, she had simply assumed it was because of Arlong's special physique and his high endurance. But thinking about it now, that blood mist must have come from Nezumi, who had been cut to pieces. Luckily, the Navy doesn't know it was you. Otherwise, we'd be in serious trouble. Right now, they're still calling you a hero. Nami patted her chest in relief, thankful for their narrow escape from disaster. But don't they already know? Cealan pointed to the newspaper in Nami's hand. If the Navy really didn't know, why would they pin Nezumi's death on Arlong and use it to boost the reputation of a dead pirate? Cealan had not killed Nezumi in public, which left the Navy room to handle the situation. But they're still promoting you as a hero. Nami was confused. In this kind of situation, shouldn't they have started hunting him down? Nami, are you afraid of me? Cealan did not answer directly but asked her a question instead. No. Nami shook her head. How could she be afraid? Cealan was her hero. But the Navy is afraid. Cealan stopped speaking and continued eating. Nami looked at Cealan, at a loss for words. Who am I following? Nami had known that Cealan was strong. He had easily wiped out the entire Arlong pirates. But she hadn't expected him to be so powerful that even the Navy didn't dare to make him an enemy. In that moment, an overwhelming sense of security filled Nami's heart. She looked at Cealan, her eyes practically sparkling. Boss Buggy, are we really going out to loot? Vice Captain Moji had a bitter expression as he held up the newspaper. He felt genuine fear toward Cealan's strength. Buggy, if you want to die, don't drag me into it. Alvida had no intention of going out. If they ran into Cealan, they wouldn't be able to handle it. Relax, Cealan is just one man. There's no way our luck could be that bad. Buggy was full of confidence. Things like that didn't just happen by coincidence. We won't steal too much. We'll stop once we've got enough to buy a decent ship. Obviously, Buggy was also afraid of Cealan. But after the battle with the Straw Hat Pirates, their ship had been damaged, and they were in urgent need of a replacement. Boss Buggy, I don't think you need to be so worried. The strategist, Kabeji, spoke up, immediately drawing everyone's attention. You're a splitting human. Cealan's swordsmanship and physical attacks are useless against you. That's right. I'm not afraid of him. The usually timid Buggy suddenly stood up with confidence. This was the strongest bounty hunter in the East Blue, but now was the time for Buggy the Clown to shine. The era of Buggy the Clown is coming. Captain, there's a good ship over there. One of the crew interrupted Buggy's fantasy. Buggy glared at him, then turned his gaze toward the ship flying a giant sword emblem on its flag. What a fine ship, what a fine ship. I want it. With just one look, Buggy couldn't take his eyes off it. He was practically drooling. The solid hull, the towering mast, the brand new sails. This ship's configuration would be considered excellent even in the Grand Line. In the East Blue, it stood out like a jewel. It was simply his dream ship. Buggy announced that this would be the first step toward building his Joker empire. Boss Buggy, don't you think this might be trouble? Kabeji was a bit concerned. With such a good ship, the people on board must be quite capable. The logo on the flag looks like that person's weapon. Alvida stared at the giant sword emblem and recalled the weapon she had seen in the newspaper. It can't be him. That guy only sails a small boat and has never been attacked. The sharp-witted Kabeji immediately dismissed Alvida's suspicion. Since Cealan's debut, his fame had spread throughout the East Blue. His iconic small ship had become well known to every pirate in these waters. What are you all so afraid of? I'm Buggy. Buggy was as arrogant as ever. He was determined to get that ship. Besides, even if it really was Cealan's ship, so what? Cealan's greatest strength was his swordsmanship, which was completely useless against Buggy's devil fruit ability. Even if Buggy couldn't win, he was confident he could escape without a scratch. If it belonged to someone else, it would be even easier. Almost all the big-name pirates in the East Blue had already been taken down by Cealan. Buggy, the Clown, was the only major pirate left. Taking this ship should be a piece of cake. All right, prepare to board them. Seeing how confident Buggy was, Vice Captain Moji quickly gave the order to attack. Idiot! What if you damage my ship? Buggy slapped Moji on the head. There was no way he would let such a fine ship get damaged. Bring me closer. I'll handle this myself. Buggy had already imagined the scene that would follow. He would show off his power. The crew of the other ship would be so terrified they would hand over the ship without a fight. On the Wind Rider, Nami also spotted the Buggy pirate's ship approaching. Cealan, pirates are coming. What should we do? Nami's voice was anxious as she called out to Cealan, who was sunbathing on the deck. Years of torment by pirates had left her with deep scars. Seeing a pirate ship approaching instinctively made her panic. Don't worry. They're just kind-hearted people coming to deliver bounty money. Cealan remained calm, even a little amused. Where had this group of foolish pirates come from, daring to attack him head-on? Were they trying to help him solve his money shortage? Yeah, there's no way they could be your opponent. Hearing Cealan's words, Nami immediately relaxed. She was no longer the lonely little cat burglar. She now had someone powerful to rely on. Cealan was the strongest bounty hunter in the East Blue, having captured countless pirates. He was the man who had defeated the two top pirate crews in the East Blue within a single week. Both Arlong and Don Krieg, considered the strongest pirates in the East Blue, had been effortlessly defeated by Cealan. No one else in these waters could threaten him. So what was there to be afraid of? If anything, it was the pirates on the other side who should be afraid. Nami quickly adjusted her mindset and even became curious. She wondered which unlucky pirate had the nerve to challenge the King of Hell. Nami was already looking forward to the scene that was about to unfold. The clueless pirates would surely be terrified once they realized it was Cealan. The two ships approached quickly. It looks like there are only 2 people on board. Buggy's eyes lit up. This was a perfect opportunity. He was about to get himself a new ship for free. Don't move. I'll handle this myself. Buggy stopped his crew, who were eager to charge forward. At a time like this, how could he let his subordinates steal the spotlight? It was his chance to show off. Alvida stared at the 2 people standing on the opposite deck, feeling that they looked strangely familiar. That beautiful girl was Nami. She had seen her before. And the man beside her, along with the giant sword by his side. Wait, that looks like Cealan. Alvida's pupils contracted as she recognized him. Before she could stop him, Buggy had already taken the lead, jumping onto the deck of the Wind Rider. Watching Buggy rush to his own doom, Alvida could no longer stay still. Idiot! I'm not dying with you. Alvida pushed the helmsman aside, cursing as she turned the pirate ship away. Our captain isn't afraid of him, so why are we running? Vice Captain Moji was displeased with Alvida's actions. He still wanted to watch Buggy fight. Fool! Even if Cealan can't kill Buggy, he can still kill us. Alvida shouted while steering the ship farther away. Buggy had the powers of the chop-chop fruit, but the rest of them did not. One swing from Cealan could slaughter everyone else on the ship. Kabeji helped Alvida steer. What he had said to Buggy earlier was just flattery. If they really encountered Cealan, the only option was to run. On the deck of the Wind Rider. Haha! Be afraid. I am Captain Buggy, with a bounty of 15 million berries. As soon as he landed on the ship, Buggy stood with his hands on his waist, laughing wildly. The exaggerated clown makeup on his face trembled with excitement, showing the look of a villain who thought he had succeeded. He widened his eyes, eager to see the terrified expressions of the 2 people before him. Unfortunately, there was no such expression. Cealan and Nami simply watched his performance as if they were watching a clown show. The moment Nami saw it was Buggy, she completely relaxed. A week ago, she had witnessed Luffy and his crew fighting Buggy. Compared to Cealan, that scene had been pathetic. It's you, little thief. Looks like I'll get my revenge today. Buggy immediately recognized Nami as the thief who had stolen his treasure before. Ha, come on, hit me if you can. Nami stuck out her tongue at Buggy, hiding behind Cealan. After spending a few days together, she had become familiar with Cealan and was no longer reserved, showing her lively side. Buggy's clown face flushed red with anger at Nami's provocation. Just as he was about to attack, he was suddenly locked in place by a wave of killing intent. Following that oppressive aura, Buggy's eyes fell on the man he had seen so often in the newspapers, standing next to the iconic giant sword. You're Cealan. Why are you here? Buggy's eyes widened, his voice trembling as it echoed across the sea. How unlucky could he be to run into this monster? Damn Kabeji! Didn't they say Cealan never switched ships? Honestly, I didn't expect to see you here either. Cealan looked at Buggy with a bit of amusement. He was very familiar with this clown. If he remembered correctly, Buggy had already been beaten down by Luffy. How did he still have the courage to cause trouble? Cealan raised his giant sword, ready to give Buggy a proper greeting. Don't get cocky. I'm not afraid of you. I ate the chop-chop fruit. Your swordsmanship is useless against me. Buggy stiffened his neck, forcing out tough words. Cealan didn't bother arguing. He simply swung the giant sword, unleashing a gust of wind. A crescent-shaped slash shot straight toward Buggy. Damn! That's powerful! Buggy's expression shifted instantly. He had once sailed with the Roger pirates and had seen monsters from the New World. The oppressive aura from this sword slash was not something that belonged to the East Blue. It was the kind of power that could dominate the Grand Line or even earn a place in the New World. In an instant, Buggy's body split into pieces, perfectly dodging the slash. The sword energy struck the sea, carving a massive crack through the water, sending waves crashing violently. Buggy's body quickly reassembled, completely unharmed. So, he really does have some ability. Cealan was not surprised. The power of the chop fruit truly was formidable. Not only could it nullify slashes, but even Dracula Mihawk's Yoru couldn't harm Buggy. Mihawk had cut Buggy into pieces, but he had reassembled unharmed. It was expected that Cealan's swordsmanship alone wouldn't be enough to deal with him. Ha ha ha. Even the so-called strongest bounty hunter in the East Blue is no match for me, Buggy the Clown. Buggy's expression gradually turned arrogant again. His confidence returned. It's finally time for me to rule the East Blue. Wahahaha. Buggy laughed wildly. Even a monster like Cealan couldn't do anything to him. His moment had come. Is that so? Cealan smiled coldly. Swordsmanship wasn't his only strength. How could Buggy, who couldn't even handle a rookie like Luffy, be arrogant in front of him? If my sword can't hurt you, does that mean I can't hit you either? Cealan turned the giant sword and slammed it down toward Buggy. The giant sword weighed 1 ton. In Cealan's hands, it wasn't just a sword, it was practically a giant hammer. Even before the strike landed, Buggy could feel the overwhelming pressure. He knew that if he got hit by this, things would not end well. His chop fruit allowed him to avoid slashes. But who would swing such a massive, blunt weapon like this in a sword fight? Buggy's body immediately split apart again. His head, torso, and limbs separated into dozens of pieces, scattering in all directions to dodge the attack. If it were that easy to dodge, Cealan wouldn't have made it this far. In Cealan's hands, the 1-ton giant sword moved as effortlessly as a feather. The sword swept through the air like a fly swatter, slapping every piece of Buggy's scattered body onto the deck. Ah! It hurts, it hurts! Buggy screamed in pain as his body was forcefully smashed back into one piece. Every part of his body ached, swelling badly. Under the repeated blows of Cealan's giant sword, Buggy's entire body had been beaten into the shape of a giant balloon. Originally just a stocky frame, he was now swollen into a fat lump. Especially his clown face, which Cealan had paid special attention to. His face was covered in blood, and even his signature round red nose had been flattened. Tears streamed from the corners of his eyes as his entire face twisted pitifully. Why was this happening? If it didn't hurt so much, Buggy would have slapped himself. Why had he picked a fight with Cealan? He should have just knelt down and begged for mercy from the start. How was it possible that they were in the same East Blue, yet the gap between them was so massive? It was too much. Buggy felt incredibly wronged. Not even in the Grand Line had he encountered such terrifying opponents. What do you think? Am I capable of dealing with you? Cealan asked playfully, kicking Buggy's swollen head aside. He really couldn't understand where Buggy got the courage to act so arrogantly in front of him. A powerhouse who could cleave the sea could easily flatten Buggy with just a stick. Don't get so full of yourself. My crew will come and rescue me. Buggy's entire body was beaten soft, but his mouth still refused to admit defeat. He still had dozens of crew members. There was still hope. Why don't you take a look and see where they are? Cealan grabbed Buggy by the hair and lifted him up, directing his gaze toward the sea. The pirate ship that had been just a few dozen meters away from the Wind Rider was now sitting more than 1,000 meters off in the distance. Buggy could even see the glint of telescope lenses reflecting light from the ship. Not only had his crew not come to rescue him, they were happily watching from afar, laughing at his misfortune. Damn you! Kabeji, I'll kill you! Buggy's face turned red with rage. He completely forgot about the pain as he cursed Kabeji's entire family. After venting his anger for a while, Buggy slumped down, his earlier arrogance completely gone. He wanted to cry, but the clown makeup on his face made it look like he was smiling instead. His flattened red nose made him look even more ridiculous. Damn it, he really had become a clown now. There was silence aboard Buggy's pirate ship. Everyone knew that Buggy had lost, and lost miserably, but no one dared to speak. Finally, Vice Captain Moji broke the silence. The captain has been defeated, should we go and rescue him? Moji stared at Buggy's pitiful state through the telescope, hesitating. If they did not go, it would seem heartless toward Captain Buggy. But if they did go, it would be risking their own lives. Go to hell. I'm not dying for him. Alvida rejected the idea without hesitation. She and Buggy were just partners. There was no need for her to throw her life away for him. If the opponent were just an ordinary pirate with a bounty of around 30 million, she might have considered it. But this was Cealan, the strongest bounty hunter who dominated the East Blue. She had witnessed the fight just now. Buggy had sworn that his chop fruit made him invincible against Cealan. But in the end, he was crushed in less than 2 seconds. There was no point in trying to save him. The first slash missed, yet it still split the sea wide open. That terrifying power was something Alvida had never seen in her life. She had no doubt that if that slash had struck their ship, every person on board would have been killed instantly. The second strike showed not only brute strength but also incredible swordsmanship. Buggy's body had been divided into at least 70 or 80 pieces, scattered in every direction. With a single swing, Cealan had struck every piece to the ground. That level of precision alone proved him a true monster even among swordsmen. We must have faith in Captain Buggy's abilities. I'm sure he'll escape on his own. Kabeji put on a serious face, as if he truly believed in Buggy's strength. While he remained loyal to Captain Buggy, there was no chance he would risk his life to rescue him. Cealan's strength was simply too terrifying. Kabeji was already trembling just watching from a distance. If he got any closer, he would probably collapse before Cealan even made a move. Yes, we must trust in Captain Buggy. The other pirates quickly echoed Kabeji's words. Cealan was so terrifying that just looking at him any longer felt like certain death. Captain Buggy was strong. He could surely handle this by himself. Their rescue would only get in the way. Moji breathed a sigh of relief. After all, he valued his own life. On the Wind Rider. Cealan, are you going to turn him in for the bounty? Nami pointed at Buggy, who now looked like a dead dog lying on the deck. In her eyes, this was no longer the infamous Buggy the Clown. This was 15 million berries in prize money. Buggy raised his head and glared at Nami with grief and anger. She had stolen all his treasure just a few days ago, and now she wanted to cash him in for a bounty. This vicious woman was too cruel. Well, let me think about it. Cealan scratched his head, clearly feeling some frustration. Buggy was really a troublesome one. He had been a trainee with the Roger Pirates, and he also had ties to one of the current 4 emperors, red-haired Shanks. But most importantly, Buggy had the legendary skill of absurd luck. From the very start, he had been standing at the peak. Just like Shanks, he had been a trainee on Roger's ship. He had eaten the chop-chop fruit, but somehow believed the fruit was holding him back. Cealan could only laugh at that. If Buggy was weak, it was not the fruit's fault. The chop-chop fruit was undeniably a powerful paramecia-type devil fruit. How could a fruit that even Roger's crew acknowledged be useless? Buggy became the nightmare of all swordsmen without much effort. If he had taken the time to develop his abilities, perhaps even reaching awakening like Doflamingo, he could have been a high-tier combatant among the 7 warlords of the sea. Buggy not only had an impressive background, but his later achievements were just as ridiculous. He enjoyed a peaceful life in the East Blue for years, living comfortably. Then he went to the Grand Line and, without improving his strength at all, became one of the 7 warlords of the sea, thanks entirely to the Navy's overestimation. When he arrived in the New World, his strength still hadn't improved, yet he somehow became one of the 4 emperors. The Cross Guild, founded by Crocodile and Mihawk, was practically handed over to him. With the help of those two, Buggy's bounty skyrocketed from 15 million berries to 3.189 billion berries. Truly the perfect example of failing upwards. Buggy, get out of the East Blue and head to the Grand Line. After thinking it over for a while, Cealan finally made his decision. If he turned Buggy in now, he would only get 15 million berries, which would increase his synchronization progress by just 0.15%. But if he let Buggy grow, there was a chance he could eventually reach that 3.189 billion bounty. That would boost synchronization progress by nearly half in one go. Alright. Nami was a bit disappointed, but she still followed Cealan's decision. After all, he was the one calling the shots. Really? You're really letting me go? Buggy's eyes widened in disbelief. He had thought this was the end for him, but now there was a glimmer of hope. Despite being beaten into a swollen mess, he actually felt a bit grateful. Of course. I always keep my word. Cealan gave him a steady look. He wasn't the type to break a promise. No problem. I'll definitely go. Buggy slapped his chest, trying to look sincere. But in his heart, he was cursing. Only an idiot would actually head to the Grand Line. The East Blue was easy pickings. The navy here was weak, and the loot was plentiful. Buggy loved it here. Once Cealan left for the Grand Line, Buggy would claim the East Blue for himself. Cealan, he's lying. Let's just turn him in for the bounty. Nami could tell at a glance that Buggy had no intention of following through. A guy like him would never be honest. Hey! Don't slander me like that. I'm a man of my word. Buggy glared at Nami, trying to look as honest as possible. In his heart, though, he was laughing. He fully admitted to being a compulsive liar. There was no way he was going to the Grand Line. Back when Luffy had beaten him, he had still tried to make a comeback. But now that this terrifying Cealan had appeared in the East Blue, he knew the Grand Line would be even worse. In short, not even a dog would go to the Grand Line. Buggy looked at Cealan, his expression full of hope. He knew this terrifying man held his fate in his hands. I always keep my word. If I say I'll let you go, then I'll let you go. Cealan stroked his chin, staring at Buggy for a moment. I don't think you have the guts to lie to me. Before Buggy could respond, an intense wave of killing intent locked onto him. Buggy's body stiffened immediately. He couldn't even resist. This pressure, it was monstrous. Completely unstoppable. Cold sweat poured down Buggy's face, and all the little schemes he had vanished from his mind. Cealan grabbed him by the hair, positioning him properly. Then, without warning, he raised his giant sword high and swung down with full force. The wind pressure from the swing surged around Buggy, and he could feel death approaching. Buggy's face twisted in horror. Hadn't Cealan just said he would let him go? This strike would definitely kill him. In a panic, Buggy instinctively tried to activate his devil fruit ability. Don't move. If you move, you'll die. Cealan's calm voice made Buggy freeze completely, abandoning all resistance. The moment the giant sword struck him, Buggy thought he saw his grandmother waving at him. Under Cealan's terrifying strength, Buggy was sent flying through the air like a rag doll. Wah! Buggy screamed at the top of his lungs as tears poured down his face. Really, provoking Cealan had been the worst decision of his life. This cursed East Blue was no place for him anymore. He, the great Buggy the Clown, was going to the Grand Line. Buggy's body shot through the air like a comet, aimed directly at the Buggy pirate's ship, still floating over 1,000 meters away. Bang! Nice! Home run! Watching the pirate ship shake violently from Buggy's impact, Cealan nodded with satisfaction. On the Buggy pirate's ship, many crew members looked at Buggy, and their bodies seemed to ache just from watching. Too miserable. Far too miserable. Beaten half to death, flung over 1,000 meters, even smashing into the mast. If it had been an ordinary person, there would be nothing left of them by now. It was only because of the monster physique common among pirates that Buggy could still speak at this point. Damn you, Kabeji, you useless bastard! Buggy collapsed on the deck, cursing. You analyzed everything so seriously, but it was all complete nonsense. Kabeji had confidently claimed that Cealan wouldn't be there, and that even if he was, Buggy's chop-chop fruit meant he had nothing to fear. But in the end, all of it had been false, and Buggy had been beaten nearly to death. Tell me the truth. Are you trying to get me killed so you can take over my pirate crew? Buggy glared at Kabeji suspiciously. Right now, Kabeji really looked like a traitor. Captain Buggy, how could I ever harm you? Kabeji was full of grievance. Even if he had 10 mouths, he couldn't explain his way out of this. How could anyone have predicted that Cealan would suddenly change ships, or that they would be unlucky enough to run right into him? And who would have thought that Cealan would be so terrifyingly strong? The chop-chop fruit was supposed to be the natural counter to swordsmanship, yet it had been completely useless against Cealan. Captain Buggy, Cealan is way too scary. Let's just stop being pirates. Looking at Buggy's miserable state, Moji hugged his lion Richie tightly, his face pale with fear. This was supposed to be the great pirate era. Why was there such a terrifying bounty hunter like Cealan? This wasn't piracy. This was torture. Who wouldn't tremble at the sight of him? If you ask me, we should just disband. Alvida couldn't help but sigh. What was the point of being a pirate anymore? Sailing was supposed to be about freedom and adventure. But now, with Cealan around, every day felt like walking on a tightrope. They were lucky Cealan had let them go this time. But what about next time? What nonsense are you all talking about? I'm going to the Grand Line. Buggy's face filled with determination. He had made up his mind. Cealan had swung 3 swords, and each one had brought him to the brink of death. Ignore Cealan's warning? He, Buggy, really would die. You're seriously going to the Grand Line? Are you insane? The other pirates stared at Buggy like he had completely lost his mind. He had almost died here in the East Blue. Going to the Grand Line would just be suicide. If you're afraid, why are you even a pirate? I am Buggy the Clown, a man even Cealan had to acknowledge. Buggy raised his head stubbornly, refusing to show weakness in front of his crew. Captain, did you hit your head too hard? When did Cealan acknowledge you? The crew looked at each other. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. He had been beaten senseless and still dared to brag like this? Of course he did. No pirate has ever escaped from Cealan before. But I did. Isn't that recognition? He recognized my potential and gave me the chance to venture into the Grand Line. We'll meet again at the top and fight once more. Buggy spoke so passionately that even he almost believed it himself. The crew fell silent. Somehow, they actually began to believe Buggy's nonsense. Suddenly, a slash flew from the Wind Rider, landing in the sea right next to the Buggy pirate's ship. In an instant, massive waves surged, nearly overturning the ship. Everyone gasped, drenched by the seawater. Such a powerful slash had been sent from thousands of meters away. If it had struck their ship directly, they would all be dead. Captain, is this what you meant by recognition? Several crew members looked at Buggy with confusion. This didn't feel like recognition at all. It felt like a clear threat. Ha ha ha. Yes. This is exactly Cealan's way of encouraging me. Buggy forced out a laugh, pretending not to care about the slash. Full speed ahead. Let's make a name for ourselves in the Grand Line. Buggy grabbed the helm himself and turned the ship toward the Grand Line. The crew was shocked by their captain's spirit. None of them noticed his trembling legs. Buggy knew very well that if he didn't leave now, the next sword would definitely hit the ship directly. He was scared out of his wits. The only thing he could do was flee to the Grand Line as quickly as possible. Facing Cealan again was something he absolutely did not want. Watching the pirate ship rush off toward the Grand Line, Cealan sheathed his giant sword with satisfaction. Cealan, why would you let him go? That was easy money delivered right to your door. Nami looked puzzled. Buggy was so weak, and the bounty was 15 million berries. Catching him would have been effortless. That kind of money was a huge sum in the East Blue. Well, he was a trainee in Roger's pirate crew. He also has deep ties to red-haired shanks of the four emperors. Cealan couldn't help feeling the situation was a little absurd. Buggy was such a useless clown. How did he end up connected to those kinds of people? And his connections didn't stop there. Silver's Rayleigh, the Dark King, and even Whitebeard's crew had ties to Buggy. Everyone said red-haired Shanks was the one who had the power of the face fruit. But in truth, Buggy was even more worthy of that title. This was a man who, with no real strength, became one of the four emperors purely through connections and sheer dumb luck. With a background like his, we have to handle things carefully. Nami nodded in agreement. No matter how useless Buggy seemed, anyone tied to the four emperors was not to be taken lightly. Surely, even Cealan would show some respect to red-haired Shanks. Why do you think that? There's no one on this sea I'm afraid to face. Cealan rolled his eyes at Nami. Did he look like the kind of person who would back down? What I mean is, Buggy might be worth more if we let him grow a little. Nami quickly adjusted her words. She knew Cealan was not the type to shy away from a fight. The Arlong pirates had connections to the 7 warlords of the sea, but Cealan had wiped them out without a second thought. Not a single fishman had survived. That's right. With his status, his bounty could easily double to 30 million berries. If we catch him then, the profit will be much higher. Nami's eyes sparkled. This was a great deal. A little patience, and they could double their earnings. 30 million. Too small. Far too small. Just based on his history as a trainee of the Roger Pirates, he's worth at least 1 billion berries. Cealan shook his finger. Nami still hadn't seen enough of the world to understand how valuable Buggy's background truly was. In fact, Cealan was holding back. He didn't want to scare her. Wah! 1 billion berries! Nami gasped, her eyes widening in shock. She couldn't even imagine that kind of money. She had worked for 8 years, tricking and robbing countless pirate crews, just to scrape together 100 million berries. 1 billion? That was on a whole other level. Even the 7 warlords of the sea in the newspapers rarely had bounties that high. Buggy is only worth 15 million berries right now. If he reaches 1 billion, that's... Nami counted on her fingers, calculating frantically. That's 66 times more. Nami's eyes turned into berries. This was an investment worth waiting for. She looked at Buggy's pirate ship in the distance as if she were staring at a golden mountain that would keep growing on its own. Watching Nami's expression, Cealan chuckled to himself. 1 billion berries wasn't even Buggy's limit. Who would have thought that this ridiculous clown would one day stand at the top of the 4 emperors, with a bounty of nearly 3.2 billion berries? The seed Cealan had just planted would one day bring him a return of 200 times. Stop daydreaming, little money grubber. How long until we reach Log Town? Cealan waved his hand in front of Nami's face, snapping her out of her thoughts. At this speed, we'll arrive early tomorrow morning. Nami quickly gave her estimate. Perfect. We'll collect the bounties, then head straight for the Grand Line. Cealan nodded with satisfaction. At this pace, they would reach the Grand Line the day after tomorrow. East Blue, Log Town, Marine Base. Cealan and Nami dragged a large sack into the Marine Base. Inside were the captured members of the Arlong pirates. In order to capture these guys, Cealan had even left his giant sword on the ship. Mr. Cealan, this is the total bounty for the Arlong pirates, 45 million berries. A marine respectfully handed over a box, opening it to count and display the contents before Cealan. Not bad. Cealan took the box and nodded with satisfaction. His berries had already been spent, and now he would need another 100 million berries to further improve his synchronization progress. These 45 million berries were just enough to keep as pocket money. Nami, here, take 2 million berries and go buy yourself something. Cealan casually handed Nami 2 stacks of berries, all in 10,000 berry notes. In his eyes, berries meant little. If they could not be used to increase his strength, they were no different from waste paper. 2 million berries might sound like a lot, but in reality, it was equivalent to only about $20,000 in purchasing power. Cealan, you're the best. Nami's eyes sparkled as she threw her arms around Cealan's neck and kissed him on the cheek. Although she had once held 100 million berries to save her village, she had never spent this much freely for herself. Alright, I'm off to shop. Nami ran off, her face flushed red. She was naturally lively and bold, but this was her first time being this close to a man. She couldn't help but feel a little shy. Haha, that was unexpectedly sweet. Cealan touched his cheek where she had kissed him, feeling pleased. Girls like Nami were always likable. Well, since I'm here, I might as well take a look around. Carrying the rest of the berries, Cealan strolled through the streets, sampling all the snacks and street food along the way. This feels great. After biting into a skewer of grilled meat, the delicious juices bursting in his mouth, Cealan couldn't help but narrow his eyes in satisfaction. Suddenly, a soft body bumped into him. Cealan immediately felt an incredible softness pressing against his chest. No way, did someone just run into me with their chest? Cealan was full of question marks. Sorry. Are you alright? Tashiji's flustered voice came from below as she bowed stiffly to Cealan. But as she bent down, the red-rimmed glasses on her nose slipped off and fell to the ground. Ah! My glasses, my glasses! Tashiji squinted, her vision blurry as she fumbled around the ground in a panic. Seriously? Cealan sighed. So there really was such a clumsy beauty in the world. He bent down, picked up the glasses, and gently placed them into Tashiji's searching hand. Thank you so much. Tashiji quickly put on the glasses and bowed again, her face bright red. You're welcome, careless little marine. Cealan looked at the flustered Tashiji and smiled softly. What could he say? Now he kind of wanted to recruit this one. I'm not careless. Tashiji's face turned even redder. She wanted to argue, but clearly lacked the confidence. Her voice grew quieter and quieter until it was barely a whisper. I'm usually very reliable. How embarrassing. Tashiji lowered her head, staring at her toes, which kept fidgeting in place. She felt so awkward she wanted to dig a hole and hide. Alright. I believe you. Cealan nodded gently, not teasing her further. He knew Tashiji well. She was a beautiful girl with a strong sense of justice and incredible bravery. Really? Thank you. Tashiji's eyes lit up in surprise. She bowed again gratefully. But as she bent down, the glasses she had just put back on began to slip off her face again. This is the worst. So embarrassing. Tashiji closed her eyes, already bracing herself for the familiar sound of her glasses hitting the ground. But the expected clatter never came. When she opened her eyes, she saw two fingers holding her glasses firmly in place. Hi. Tashiji looked up, her gaze meeting Cealan's gentle smile. Looking at his masculine and handsome face, she felt a strange flutter in her chest. Thank you. I'm Tashiji, a Master Chief Petty Officer of the Marines. Tashiji quickly extended her right hand toward Cealan, hoping to introduce herself properly. You're welcome. I'm Cealan, just a humble bounty hunter. Cealan reached out and shook her hand, giving his name. Cealan, bounty hunter. The name, the appearance, the giant sword. The details Tashiji had just overlooked due to her flustered state now all came together. You're Cealan. The strongest bounty hunter in the East Blue. Tashiji's mouth fell open in shock. The man she had just bumped into on the street turned out to be the legendary strongest bounty hunter in the East Blue. From the moment Cealan had steadied her glasses, she had sensed he was no ordinary man. But she had never expected that he was the one making headlines across the entire sea. So I'm that well known among the Marines. Cealan chuckled, a bit surprised that even someone from Marine headquarters had heard of him. Of course. Every Marine in the East Blue knows your name. The East Blue Commodore personally gave orders to try and recruit you into the Navy. Tashiji looked at Cealan sincerely. It was clear she also hoped he might one day become a comrade in arms. Forget it. I'm not interested in being tied down. Cealan shook his head. After all, he hadn't come to this world to work for someone else. With strength like his, why work under others when he could build his own force? What a shame. I thought maybe we could fight side by side. Tashiji's face showed genuine regret. She had read the newspapers and knew just how terrifying Cealan's strength was. Meeting him in person, seeing how gentle and charismatic he was, only deepened her respect. She couldn't even imagine how reassuring it would be to have someone like him as a comrade. Then why not join my crew instead? We can fight together that way. Cealan smiled as he extended an invitation. The Navy wanted to recruit him? Well, he wanted to recruit from the Navy too. Finding trustworthy allies among pirates was like fishing gold out of sewage. There were a few good ones, but they were rare. But the Marines, at least, were trained, reliable, and mostly aligned with justice. Much easier to work with. Me. Tashiji was stunned. I want to collect all the famous swords in the world and keep them from falling into the hands of evil pirates. I want to use my marine salary to buy up every famous sword. For a moment, Tashiji wavered, but she still shook her head. With the Navy's salary, you'll never be able to achieve that dream. Cealan's voice was calm but firm. It was the truth. The famous swords of the world were worth more than a fortune. Some were priceless. With a sergeant's salary, Tashiji could never hope to buy even one. Without saying a word, Cealan quietly opened the box of bounty money in his hands. After giving Nami 2 million berries, he still had 43 million remaining. Stacks of neatly bundled berries filled the box, their ink still fresh. Or rather, that was the smell of money. Tashiji's eyes widened. Just how many famous swords could someone buy with this much money? Every famous sword is tied to the life of a swordsman. Very few are ever willing to sell. Cealan's words poured cold water on her excitement, snapping her back to reality. Tashiji fell into silence, looking down, unsure of what to do. I'm heading to the Grand Line soon. There are far more famous swords there than here in the East Blue. Join me. Help me hunt down the pirates who misuse those swords and take them back from evil hands. Cealan smiled softly, his words like the whisper of a devil's temptation. Be good. Join my crew. He reached out his hand again, inviting her. Tashiji's expression shifted as she wrestled with her decision. Finally, she raised her head, eyes clear with determination. Then, please take care of me. She firmly grasped Cealan's outstretched hand. Looking at the serious and determined Tashiji, Cealan smiled faintly. Partner +1. Cealan, the Commodore is here to see you. Nami shouted excitedly as she rushed over, followed by a group of Marines. Leading the Marines was Commodore Cealan, with Smoker standing beside him. Nami never thought she would one day be associated with such a high-ranking figure. What's going on here? Seeing Cealan chatting and laughing with Tashiji, Nami and the Marines behind her were stunned. Nami walked up to Cealan, feeling a surge of jealousy in her heart. They had only been apart for a short while, yet here was another young woman already acting so close to him. Smoker and the Marines from Logtown were also confused. Wasn't that their own Tashiji? Why was she being so friendly with Cealan? But with the Commodore present, they were too embarrassed to question it out loud. So you are Cealan? Truly young and promising. Cealan broke the awkward silence. He was not here to watch the younger generation bicker. I am Ames Cealan of Marine Headquarters, currently serving as the overseer of the East Blue. Cealan formally introduced himself, showing great respect towards Cealan. I'm Cealan Alaric, a bounty hunter. So, what brings you here to speak with me? Cealan responded politely, but his tone was indifferent. He showed little regard for Cealan. After all, this was a branch that had allowed a disgrace like Nezumi to operate unchecked. Their strength was unimpressive, and Cealan felt no obligation to show deference. The incident with Nezumi was a major scandal within the East Blue, though the information had been suppressed. Only Cealan and a few high-ranking officers were aware of the truth. The surrounding Marines, unaware of the real situation, glared at Cealan. To them, Cealan was the highest-ranking officer in the East Blue and an admired figure among countless Marines. Even if Cealan was the strongest bounty hunter in the East Blue, showing such disrespect was hard for them to accept. Silence! Don't embarrass yourselves! Smoker shouted through clenched teeth, cigar smoke curling around him. He could not stand his subordinates acting so recklessly. As the Marine stationed at Logtown and a headquarters colonel, he knew exactly why Cealan had come to speak with Cealan. Like Cealan, he had no desire to become enemies with Cealan over a disgrace like Nezumi. Cealan calmly glanced around, and the restless Marines instantly quieted. Like a lion surveying its territory, his mere gaze silenced the weaker beasts. Even Cealan and Smoker felt a subtle pressure in their hearts. This was the presence of a true powerhouse. Nami and Tashiji, standing beside Cealan, felt their bodies shiver involuntarily under the weight of his aura. Goosebumps rose on their skin. At that moment, the meaning of the strongest bounty hunter in the East Blue became even clearer to everyone present. No matter where he stood, Cealan's strength commanded respect. Mr. Cealan, we have no hostile intentions. Cealan withstood the pressure and raised his hands in a gesture of peace. He was glad he had come in person. A man like Cealan deserved this level of attention. If you have something to say, get to the point. My time is valuable. Cealan's tone was cold. He was already growing impatient with this unexpected interruption from the Marines. Cealan looked at Cealan carefully, gauging his reaction before continuing. I would like to officially invite you once more to join the Marines. If you agree, you will be promoted directly to headquarters captain and placed in the core training sequence. With your potential, there is no doubt you could one day stand among the 3 admirals. Cealan's expression was sincere as he spoke. This was the highest offer he had been able to secure from Marine headquarters, an unprecedented invitation. He had fought hard with Fleet Admiral Sengoku for this opportunity, hoping to dispel the ill feelings caused by the Nezumi incident. Colin was confident that no one could refuse such generous conditions. The surrounding Marines were all stunned, staring at Cealan with envy. If he agreed, he would soar to the top immediately. Starting as a headquarters captain and entering the elite training program, this was the kind of opportunity they could not even dream of. Colin's evaluation of Cealan was that he had the potential to reach the level of admiral. Admirals were the highest combat force of the world government, viewed as nightmares by countless pirates and held in awe across the seas. Even Nami and Tashiji looked at Cealan nervously. If he accepted, what would happen to their plans? It sounds good, but I refuse. Cealan did not hesitate at all and rejected Colin's invitation outright. It was not a matter of position. Even if they offered him an admiral's seat on the spot, he had no interest in becoming a dog for the Celestial Dragons. Joining the Marines was out of the question. That said, he was still willing to recruit from the Marines. Their training produced good talent. He, actually refused. Many of the Marines found it hard to believe. Faced with such favorable terms, Cealan had declined so casually. For a moment, several Marines felt deeply shaken. The position and benefits they had longed for meant so little in Cealan's eyes. Why? Can you tell me your reason? Colin was stunned. This was not the outcome he had expected. Could anyone truly walk away from such an offer? Colin stared at Cealan, genuinely wanting to understand his mindset. I don't want to be tied down. I simply want to do as I please. Cealan's reply was calm and direct. In this world, he would live as he wished. No one could restrict him. No one could force him to do what he did not want to do. Just because of that? Do you even understand what you're giving up? The full training resources of the Marines. Rokushiki, haki, swordsmanship, and guidance from veteran instructors. You would develop your potential faster than anyone else. You would grow into a top-level powerhouse in record time. Colin could understand Cealan's attitude, but not his choice. As someone deeply embedded in the Navy, Colin was aware of its darker aspects. The heavenly tribute, the celestial dragons, the political manipulations, he knew all of it. But compared to the offer laid before Cealan, all of that seemed trivial. Colin continued to describe the privileges and resources of Marine elites, hoping to sway Cealan's decision. I still refuse. Faced with Colin's tempting promises, Cealan did not waver in the slightest. If not for his current situation, maybe he would have considered climbing the ranks of the Marines. But with the Heroic Spirit Synchronization System, his strength could grow at an absurd rate. There was no need to subject himself to anyone else's control. Swordsmanship and physical prowess? His Heracles template already provided that. Haki? He would find crocodile and harvest that experience for himself. If he wanted to go even further, Kaido was waiting, and 3 stick lessons would be more than enough to teach him. Why waste time climbing the marine ladder when his system allowed him to grow faster on his own? In that case, I won't push further. If you ever change your mind, the Marines will always welcome you. Colin looked disappointed but kept his composure, maintaining a respectful attitude toward Cealan. Even if such an independent powerhouse could not be recruited, it was important not to become his enemy. Colin was not too disheartened. After all, he still had a backup plan. Since you don't want to join the Marines, please accept this hunter license. Colin looked at Cealan seriously and took out a certificate. Hunter license? Cealan wondered if he had misheard. What was this? He didn't remember anything like this existing when he watched the anime. A hunter license is a professional certificate issued by the Marines to bounty hunters. Anyone who holds it is considered a friend of the Marines and holds the same status as a Marine headquarters colonel. The license holder also receives a monthly salary. During your travels, you can resupply at any Marine base and request assistance from the Marines. When you need to enter the New World, you can cross the Red Line directly without having to sneak through the sea beneath it. Colin handed over the hunter license solemnly, hoping that Cealan would accept it. The Marines stationed at Logetown were all stunned. This was the first time they had ever heard of such a certificate. Wasn't this a bit too generous? Among the Marines present, aside from Colin, only Smoker held the rank of captain. A bounty hunter who wasn't even part of the Marines was now being given the same treatment as a Marine captain, simply by holding a hunter license. If not for Cealan's reputation and Colin's authority, the Marines might have questioned this openly on the spot. Colin understood their frustration, but there were always exceptions in the world. Some people deserved special treatment. This hunter license was part of Colin's backup plan, a special certificate prepared specifically for Cealan. Before this, the Marines had never issued anything like it. Until Cealan appeared, bounty hunters had never been considered important in the East Blue. It was difficult to hunt pirates there, and bounty hunters were not seen as deserving of such recognition. To qualify for this certificate, one would need the strength of at least a vice admiral and also maintain a friendly relationship with the Marines. In other words, this license was tailor-made for Cealan. With requirements this strict, the Marines had no intention of ever issuing a second one. This sounds great. What are the conditions? Cealan was in no rush to accept the hunter license. After all, there is no such thing as a free lunch. Other than maintaining a friendly relationship with the Marines, there are no additional conditions. Colin was very straightforward. This license was simply meant to establish a good relationship with Cealan and avoid making him an enemy. There was no other choice. Cealan's potential was too great. He was a bounty hunter inclined toward the Marines. Even if he wouldn't join the Marines, they couldn't afford to push him into the pirates' camp. The world government was willing to recruit pirates by creating the 7 warlords of the sea, even at the cost of its own dignity. So giving Cealan, who currently had the strength of an elite vice admiral with the potential to become an admiral, a hunter license was perfectly reasonable. In that case, I will accept it. I hope we can have a good partnership going forward. With that, Cealan no longer hesitated and took the hunter license. For now, he had no intention of going against the Marines. Besides, bounties were issued by the Marines, so there was no harm in accepting their goodwill. If the Marines ever provoked him, it would not stop him from getting angry at that time. Happy cooperation. Colin let out a sigh of relief and shook hands with Cealan, his face full of joy. Ever since Nezumi had been killed by Cealan, Colin had been worried that Cealan would hold a grudge against the Marines. Now that Cealan had accepted the hunter license, Colin could finally set his mind at ease. Well then, if fate allows, we'll meet again. Taking Nami and Tashiji with him, Cealan turned and left. The purpose of coming to Logetown had been accomplished, and they had unexpectedly obtained the hunter license. It was time to set sail again. As Cealan and his group walked away, Colin, relieved of a great burden, also left with a smile. After the 2 main figures were gone, the previously tense Marines suddenly became restless. Captain Smoker, I want to be a bounty hunter too. A Marine spoke up quietly, clearly envious of the treatment Cealan had received. He had served in the Marines for 5 years and still hadn't made it to lieutenant. Cealan didn't even join the Marines, yet he was immediately treated like a colonel. The difference in treatment left him frustrated. Yeah, I want to be a bounty hunter too. We're also hunting pirates. Why does he get treated so well? Other Marines joined in, their eyes full of envy and dissatisfaction. Blinded by the idea of the hunter license, they could no longer see their own limitations. Shame on you. Think before you speak. Smoker looked at the group of Marines with disgust. Do you even understand how strong Cealan is? And what about your own strength? Just now, you were frozen in fear under his gaze. Now you're bold enough to talk big? Captain Smoker, we can't accept this. We want special treatment too. The Marines shouted back, their faces red with anger. Normally, they feared Smoker's authority, but now their jealousy had overwhelmed their reason. Disobedient, are you? Dissatisfied, are you? Do you even know how strong Cealan is? Weren't you the ones trembling in fear just a moment ago? You must be one of them. Smoker removed his cigar and blew a puff of smoke directly into the face of the Marine who was causing the most trouble. The Marine choked and coughed from the smoke but still stared at Smoker stubbornly. I may not be as strong as him, but I've contributed to the Marines. Thinking back to Cealan's imposing presence, the Marine's body trembled uncontrollably, but he refused to back down. As a Marine stationed in Logetown, he had captured many pirates and believed his contributions were significant. He often bragged about them. Cealan wiped out all the pirates in the entire East Blue. Do you think the petty thieves you caught can compare to that? Smoker scoffed. The total bounty of the pirates captured by these Marines was only about 5 million berries. Compared to Cealan's record, that wasn't even 1%. If Cealan had joined the Marines, based on his achievements alone, he would more than qualify to be a commodore. Smoker jabbed his finger into the Marine's chest repeatedly, forcing him to step back again and again. Finally, the Marine collapsed to the ground, his spirit broken. The other Marines no longer had the same energy. One by one, they lowered their heads like defeated quails. If any of you want the same special treatment as Cealan, I'll transfer you to the West Blue right away. You don't even need to clear out the entire West Blue. Flatten half of it, and I'll personally make you a captain. Smoker swept his gaze across the room. Not a single Marine dared to step forward. Everyone lowered their heads. After being scolded by Smoker, they finally came to their senses. Who was Cealan? His power was so great that even Colin came in person to recruit him. His achievements were recognized throughout the entire East Blue. And who were they? Even if all of them joined forces, they still wouldn't be able to defeat him. The pirates they had captured couldn't even compare. How could they possibly expect the same treatment as Cealan? Smoker looked around at the silent Marines, deeply disappointed. If even one of them had the courage to step forward, Smoker would have respected him and focused on training him. Unfortunately, not a single one did. Smoker sneered silently. Compared to Cealan, who had the ambition to reject the Marine's offer and sail into the Grand Line on his own, these men lacked even the basic courage and resolve. Yet they dared to dream of special treatment. Ridiculous. At that moment, Smoker seemed to understand why Cealan had refused to join the Marines. With garbage like Nezumi and these weak-willed Marines around, how could they ever achieve anything great? Without even glancing at them again, Smoker turned and walked away to rest. The next day at noon, the sun was high in the sky. At the training ground of the Logetown Marine Base, Smoker was training as usual. Strange, why didn't that foolish woman show up today? Smoker habitually lit a cigar. Tashiji, who usually practiced swordsmanship on the training ground, had not appeared all day. It wasn't that he had any special feelings for Tashiji, but that foolish woman was one of the few Marines he acknowledged. Wait, wasn't she following Cealan yesterday? Smoker took a deep puff of his cigar and blew out a large smoke ring. Now that he thought about it, he hadn't seen Tashiji at all since Cealan left yesterday. Could that foolish woman have been tricked by someone? No, I have to go bring her back. Smoker put out his cigar and was just about to leave when he noticed a Marine hesitantly standing nearby. Captain Smoker, this is Master Chief Petty Officer Tashiji's resignation letter. The Marine handed him a piece of paper, his hands trembling. Smoker unfolded the letter. Captain Smoker, thank you for your care. Please don't worry about me. I have joined Cealan's crew to search for more famous swords. I am truly sorry for the trouble I've caused you in the past. I hope that the next time we meet, you will have been promoted to Commodore. Also, please stop smoking. It's bad for your health. The letter was short, the handwriting rushed and sloppy, as if written in a hurry. My assistant was kidnapped. Smoker lit another cigar, took a deep breath, and forced himself to stay calm. Though Tashiji was foolish, she was someone whose sense of justice Smoker recognized and one of his few friends. He really couldn't figure out how Tashiji could have been lured away. In less than half a day, Cealan had somehow managed to take his assistant. Tashiji, you're far too easy to fool. Forget it. I just hope you'll be safe. Smoker gave up the idea of going after Tashiji. This was her choice. As a friend, the only thing he could do was wish her well in achieving her dream. That guy Cealan, he should be trustworthy, right? Thinking about Cealan's strength and the good reputation he usually had, Smoker felt a little more at ease. In front of Reverse Mountain, aboard the Wind Rider. After departing from Logetown yesterday morning and sailing for a full day, the Wind Rider finally arrived at Reverse Mountain. This was the last hurdle before entering the Grand Line. Reverse Mountain was a strange and dangerous place. The powerful ocean currents of the four seas converged here, pushing the seawater against gravity and forcing it upward. With this current, ships could ride the flow up Reverse Mountain and enter the Grand Line. But if the ship wasn't handled properly, it would crash into the Red Line, leading to shipwreck and death. So this is Reverse Mountain? The seawater is actually flowing upward, amazing. Tashiji stared at the rising seawater in wonder. She had come from Marine headquarters and usually traveled between the Grand Line and the East Blue without having to pass through Reverse Mountain. Marine warships had their own propulsion systems and sea stone-coated hulls, allowing them to pass through the calm belt and enter the Grand Line safely. Compared to Tashiji's amazement at the marvel of Reverse Mountain, Nami looked a little anxious. The roaring sound of the current smashing against the mountain walls echoed in her ears. The violent sea current struck the rock face, instantly turning the seawater into mist. If the ship got caught in it, it would be shattered instantly. In the narrow channel, the seawater surged upward at terrifying speed. If the ship wasn't steered properly, it would be flung into the air and smashed onto the Red Line. Every aspect of this place posed the ultimate challenge for a navigator. This place is dangerous. Can we really make it through safely? Nami bit her lower lip, feeling nervous. Even though she believed she was the best navigator in the East Blue, she still felt fear when facing such a deadly challenge. Relax. We all believe in your skills. Right, Tashiji. Cealan gently patted Nami on the back, trying to soothe the nervous navigator. Yes. I believe in Nami too. Tashiji nodded earnestly. Although she had only joined the crew yesterday, she was sincere and willing to trust her companions. Why are you two so confident in me? Nami couldn't understand where Cealan's confidence in her came from. Because you're the best navigator in my eyes. Of course I believe in you. Faced with Nami's question, Cealan simply smiled and gave her encouragement. This was top-level navigation talent. A little Reverse Mountain was nothing for her. Because we're companions. We have to trust each other. Tashiji didn't think too much about it. To her, trusting each other was just the natural thing to do. Ha, since you say so, I won't let you down. Nami exhaled slowly, her eyes now full of determination. Both of her partners trusted her completely. She couldn't disappoint them. It was just a mountain. She was determined to conquer it. Get ready. I'm going in. Nami gripped the helm tightly and turned it with force. The Wind Rider followed the upward current, charging up reverse mountain. The raging currents rocked the ship violently. Sea spray and strong winds lashed the deck. Tashiji stood beside Nami, helping her control the helm. Cealan stood motionless at the bow of the ship, allowing the waves to batter against him as he stood firmly. He was there as insurance in case anything went wrong. As they approached the summit, the currents from the other three seas collided, creating a massive wave several dozen meters high that surged toward them. Cealan! There's a wave! Our ship is going to be hit! Nami cried out. She and Tashiji tried their best to steer the ship away, but the wave was too huge. The wave completely blocked the channel, leaving them no room to dodge. If they were hit by it, the ship would be smashed against the red line and destroyed instantly. Don't panic. It's just a wave. Cealan remained calm, completely unfazed by the sudden threat. He raised his massive sword and unleashed a crescent-shaped slash at the incoming wave. The moment the slash struck the wave, the towering water was instantly sliced apart and scattered into mist, losing all its force. So strong! Nami and Tashiji were both stunned. They had seen Cealan easily defeat pirates before, but they hadn't expected him to be just as overwhelming when facing the power of nature. It's great to have such a captain! Tashiji shouted excitedly. Cealan, standing there with his giant sword, cutting down the wave, gave her an incredible sense of security. Nami nodded in agreement. No matter the situation, Cealan always made people feel at ease. With joy from surviving the crisis, Tashiji and Nami worked together to steer the Wind Rider safely through Reverse Mountain. The rest of the journey was smooth, and they finally reached Twin Cape without incident. As Cealan expected, they did not encounter Laboon, since the whale didn't crash into the red line every day. Looking at the vast blue sea ahead, Cealan felt full of spirit. The East Blue wasn't bad, but for him, the Grand Line held even greater possibilities.